Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon, friends of Zimbabwe and friends of the channel. Something tells me that they've had their fill. The people that have been eating Zimbabwe, the international people that have been eating the country, they've been feeding on the country, and I feel in my spirit that they're now full of what they've been doing, and they do not like the trajectory that the country continues to take, and therefore they want to take a turn. Don't ask me who they are. I don't know. I just felt it in my spirit. The Lord is just motivating me. I just felt it in my spirit that the international powers, the powers that be, that punished Zimbabwe. Remember, Zimbabwe were being punished, for land reform. I've said it before here that there are some people in countries I won't mention that were not happy with our land reform. And God told me that these people were not happy, so they punished your country, and now they have overdone it. And I feel like within themselves they're beginning to feel sorry for the Zimbabweans. I was looking at another statistic today, uh, of the inflation. Our current inflation is 220% in Zimbabwe. It is number one in the world. And we've been number one for so many years for having the highest inflation rate in the whole world. It's almost running almost 20 years now. So you begin to see that our punishers are beginning to see that, you know what, I've punished these guys for far too long. So let me just have a good heart, and they have fed the Zimbabwe to the full. So now they are developing a developmental mindset concerning Zimbabwe. God is changing their hearts. Okay, so now this should be a warning to those that are in ZANU-PF, because those in ZANU-PF still think that the global powers want a failed Zimbabwe. All right, I feel like the spirit of God has turned the hearts of these billionaires around the world. Those who have got the those who actually are the real ZANU-PF enablers. The real ZANU-PF enablers are not the local Zimbabweans, the ones that are involved in corruption together with the government. Well, that they are enablers to a very small extent, but the biggest enablers are actually those who run the world. I mean, the British Empire, the Washington establishment. Those are the ones who determine who should be in power and who should not be in power. Those are the ones who can uh, eliminate fraud across the world. Right now in Zimbabwe, we're dealing about the fraud that is in the gold industry. They are turning the country into a laundromat and stuff like that. These are the enemy of the global order, the enemy of enemies of the free world, who are evading the systems that have been put in place by the free world, which is led by Washington and the European establishment. And actually, these systems are supposed to be global systems that we all agree upon. But then, because uh, um, uh, these dodgy tax evaders, or these uh, uh, international politicians who break laws, so they have to clean their monies, and then they use a country like Zimbabwe, basket case country like Zimbabwe, to be their whorehouse. Zimbabwe is just a country that is just being screwed. It's like a whorehouse. Anybody can just come in there and get like very cheap sex. We're a stinking whorehouse of a country, and those that run the world look at us, and now they are feeling sorry. I mean, this is like a word of knowledge that God gave me, that they're actually feeling sorry that what they've been doing is just terrible. So they want to bring about a change, and therefore we will see as the time goes by, the support for a corrupt regime in Harare is going to cease. In the past 20 years, the British government has always been talking about, has had these sanctions on Harare, right? And the Americans had sanctions on Harare, but they know that the sanctions do not really stop ZANU-PF from being corrupt. They know that the sanctions actually perpetuate the suffering of the masses. And I told you that the ones that they were angry with is the masses, because it is the black masses that took away the white farmers. So that anger is now, if it displayed its course, now the punishment is finished, and God is showing me that even in their hearts, they're beginning to self-introspect to see, say, no, we've overdone in Zimbabwe. Let us change and do something that is better. And if they are going to do something which is better, it may include the removal of sanctions. Okay, the removal of sanctions may actually lead to bringing Zimbabwe back into the international scene. It's going to make it difficult for the money launderers to operate in Zimbabwe if our banking systems and our minerals are allowed into the London Mercantile Exchange, and our reserve bank is also participating in the what you call it, the global monetary system effectively. I'm sure there will be a better policing in the country that will come from experts from the Western world, and therefore who will be able to propel the country into a greater trajectory of growth. Now, for that to happen, it does not necessarily mean that ZANU-PF has to be removed from power. No, it does not necessarily mean that there has to be a regime change agenda. So I do not think that uh, we should look at it from this way, to say that for this to happen, Emerson Mnangagwa must cease to be president. No, ZANU-PF can still be in power. ED can still be president. However, they have to make decisions themselves as ZANU-PF to say, we too as ZANU-PF, they need to say, we too as ZANU-PF, we think that we have overdone our looting experiment. We think that we have overdone this thing. The Zimbabweans have suffered too long. We as ZANU-PF are willing to come to the table and talk with the Zimbabweans and say, okay, Zimbabweans, let us re-engage with the international community and also the internal community. Remember, the sanctions are from the international community affecting ZANU-PF, but not only ZANU-PF, but the rest of us. But ZANU-PF has got two enemies, which is the local people and the international community. As I've been saying, that I feel in my spirit, as God is throwing in my spirit, that the international community is ready to forgive even ZANU-PF. Is ready to forgive even Itim Nangaka. They have way past that. Now, therefore, now it is up to the NPF now to say, we also want to join the international community in desiring Zimbabwe to grow. Well, if you ask individuals in ZANU-PF, do you want Zimbabwe to grow? They will say yes, and genuinely they want Zimbabwe to grow. They will tell you that the sanctions prohibit them uh, pre, um, from growing the economy, which is partly true, but they do not want to highlight their corruption and the stuff that we're seeing these days through Al Jazeera and the like. Uh, it is time that they also come to a table of confession and say, okay, now we're confessed, we've done wrong. Now, let us reform and do right. So now, reforming does not actually necessarily mean doing things that take you out of power necessarily. That doesn't necessarily mean that. Political reforms and giving rights, giving people rights, the freedom of speech, and opening up the economy can still happen under the auspices of ZANU-PF, but then it has to be a repentant ZANU-PF that is willing to re-engage the whole international community. And if ZANU-PF does so, the international community will be more than willing to remove the sanctions. So you see, there has to be a move in Harare. So the Harare is always asking for the removal of sanctions, but Harare is not moving the needle on human rights. It's very simple about human rights. Let me just tell you, stop arresting opposition politicians like Job Sikala, and allow Nelson Chamisa and other opposition political parties to do their rallies, freely, even if there's more people than you. Just let that be, you know, and the freedom of speech. Let there be no fear in the country. Don't abduct people or threaten people or give the impression that people are afraid of speaking against the government because it's their country. Let people protest if they want to protest, and with the police watching, and without any repercussions to the people of Zimbabwe. And those kind of things, those kind of civil liberties that will help the international community to recognize that ZANU PF is actually moving towards something. I mean, these things that I've just said, ZANU PF loses nothing by doing that. You absolutely lose absolutely nothing. In fact, ZANU PF and ED Mnangagwa might actually find uh, uh, a mileage from it, and they might actually be loved by the Zimbabweans if the Zimbabweans are all of a sudden allowed to be these things, something that Robert Mugabe and the previous regimes have not been able to give to the Zimbabweans. So it's kind of like counterintuitive if you look at it, because somebody in ZANU-PF would think we can't do that because we will give the opposition more power. But doing that actually gives you more power in the mindset of not only the local Zimbabweans, but actually the international community. I haven't gone far. I'm just spoke about these civil liberties only, and also let's talk about the economy, opening up the economy and letting people succeed. ZANU PF does not lose anything if someone who has got a business that is succeeding is allowed to succeed instead of having this policy of Tinotora. And Tinotora is a policy whereby um, government agents, due to their proximity to those in power, are able to come to private businesses and just take businesses. Take, I mean, we know about that in the gold and mining sector. If someone could find a place where there's good gold that's coming up, ZANU PF agents or some powerful people who would come and claim that uh, that mine, they'll come with paperwork. I've heard that innocent Idim Nangagwa's children do that. As I've heard that you get a piece of land, prospected piece of land, found a very good gold, or the output is very good, whatever. If there's something like that, you know what I'm talking about. They come with some paperwork, which obviously is a fabrication. It's a way of taking away that mine from you because that mine is extremely profitable. So those kind of actions we need to get rid of, because it makes the government look like a place where you just come to loot everything, everywhere, every time, anyhow. I do believe that having the power, political power, gives you some sort of like leverage sometime. I mean, in business, but greed causes you to want everything, everywhere, every time. Because of that, the country will not succeed in anything. The country will fail everywhere, every time, and therefore we lead this we are led to this place of a basket case. So there's an OPF people who have been feeding themselves for far too long. I mean, you should come to a position where you say enough is enough. Now we have eaten enough, or now let us give chance, let us create space for other people as well in Zimbabwe to succeed. I would give it some few points and say that in the gold market itself, the gold industry and mining industry, there has been some kind of giving that space. So you have done a good job there. You have moved. You're not necessarily like rigid. There has been a movement. We're talking about artisanal mining, and the ET government likes to attribute that to Edim Nangagwa. That is the one who opened up the artisanal mining, of course, from being illegal miners, illegal small scale miners, to legalized, now it's called artisanal miners. And they also like to talk about the property boom in Zimbabwe because of gold proceeds. And yes, it's true, there is a lot of Zimbabweans that are in the mining industry that are benefiting. Of course, you could argue and say the bulk of that mining industry has been overtaken by the Chinese and foreigners and other foreigners. And there's still some work to do. At least there's baby steps there, so we can commend the president and that he's going through the right direction. There's okay, more can be done. So uh, seeing that good that has happened in the mining industry, it would be lovely for the ZANU PF government to now extend that um, to other industries as well, to farming. Farming has been a total disaster. I mean, there is more we can do in the farming sector in opening up this that market, and also generally opening up more markets to be free would really build the economy much quicker and faster. Before we even get there, as ZANU PF attempts to do that or moves towards doing that, it sends a positive message to the international community so that they could be they could meet ZANU PF halfway, remove sanctions, and therefore pave way for a Zimbabwe that is more uh, productive, that is more successful, you know. And the international community does have an incentive right now to to forgive Zimbabwe and let Zimbabwe succeed, because of the geopolitical factors that are currently at play at the moment. As we can see that in Africa, China and Russia, which are the bad actors according to our global leaders, have encroached into the whole of Africa and that whole African space. And London and Washington are lagging behind. And therefore, the policy of London and Washington of punishing Harare will not be useful in their um, attempt to win back sub-Saharan Africa, especially at this point in our economic history as a globe, where we need um, resources that come from countries like Zimbabwe and the DRC, like the lithiums and rare earth materials that are found in this region. The US cannot be seen now pursuing punitive policies that punish governments in this part of the world if it really indeed wants to compete in the next economy, in the next Internet of Things, you know, electric vehicles and stuff like that, with China controlling Southern Africa and China having good relations with these Southern African um, communities or economies, albeit to the detriment of the ordinary Zimbabweans and ordinary SADC members, SADC population. China could have a huge edge in in overtaking the United States economically. Talking about the GDP growth first and foremost, if China is allowed to carry on being active in this way in the region together with their partner Russia. And China is for me is like this partner that doesn't sound aggressive militarily. They they want to play the diplomats who are cool and collected, and they've got their partner, which is Russia, which is more militant and carefree and can invade any country at any given time. They have got their Wagner group across Africa, which the United States is trying to counter. But my argument is, I'm saying that you cannot counter Wagner Group, Russia and China and Africa by being punitive or by punishing to these African governments. You need to come as Washington to a place whereby you begin to open your doors to countries, especially Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe is going to be pivotal. When we talk about Africa, Zimbabwe, let, let me shed light to the Washington policymakers on why Zimbabwe is the most important partner that the United States is missing in order to piece together this African thing. As you can see, Zimbabwe is from a British colony, so we have got close economic and religious and language ties with Britain, which is English that Washington also speaks, and we are socially tied as well to the Western world, and our population is fairly educated, hardworking, and non-violent. As we can see that in the past, excuse, excuse me, in the past 20 years that Zimbabwe has been having this political upheavals and dire economic performance. The Zimbabwean people themselves have stayed vigilant in being peaceful people, you know, unlike other parts of the continent where the people are very violent and do terrible things to other human beings. For example, you've never heard in Zimbabwe of people burning other people, but elsewhere in Africa, don't want to mention names, it happens. So when you're looking at Zimbabwe, you're looking at a country which can be a partner that is level headed and can easily integrate into the Western community, and therefore be uh, that light in the middle of darkness that could possibly inspire the whole region to revert back to the Washington orbit, especially if we get Zimbabwe working a good relationship with Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe will be very pivotal in getting the DRC to function properly for the interests of the free world community. So, because if as Zimbabwe, if we join the free world, the interest of the free world, the interest of our friends will take center stage. That will be to counter the interests of the oppressive world that is led by the Chinese and the Russians. And at the moment, our Zimbabwean politicians are very much stuck in that Russian China orbit because of the sanctions and because of the fears that they will be caught up on the mismanagement of the economy that they've been doing all along. Generally they are desperate. What I'm saying that ZANU-PF is in a very desperate position right now. It's a wounded animal. ZANU-PF. Its choices are very limited right now. They would love the sanctions to be removed. They would love to come back to the Washington orbit, but the problem is that like they still have to overcome the weaknesses of corruption and 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 once they're able to do that, and once Washington comes to a realization that we do need each other to counter the forces of darkness that are looking as if they are going to take over the whole world, because if they take over Africa, China could overtake the United States in the next economy, because the next economy is what I think is the next frontier that big armies cannot do, or even the nuclear weapon cannot do. The idea of controlling the Internet of Things, the idea of you know controlling the next technologies, the next coming technologies using these rare earth materials is going to be important in determining who's going to be the global leader. And if China is able to source that from Southern Africa together with Russia, and knowing their governance systems of operation, is meaning that the whole world will be led by a super power that does not respect human rights, that is that paints a bleak and dark future for the world. For us, those who want to rally for the forces of good, we need to counter that. I think it makes sense that we need to counter that, and for that to happen, partnerships have to be created between Harare and Washington, and as I've said, that those partnerships should not necessarily be looking at regime change. Okay, regimes will always change, as what as it should happen in a democratic state. But however, a regime change shouldn't be the pre conditions for re-engagement. But however, the facilitation of transitioning from authoritarian governance systems to systems that are opening up to the people. ZANU-PF has to be seen doing something. Has to make some sort of like a movement towards being righteous, and then Washington can open up, you know, its doors. And then I don't want to sound too much like a ZANU-PF advocate, but I do recognize the importance for level-headedness and removing the emotions that we've heard before, because they are a hindrance towards creating a future, a common future that is uh, productive and uh, and uh, and beneficial to all parties that are involved, beneficial to the Washington cause, beneficial to the government in Harare, beneficial to the people of Zimbabwe, because these are the three pillars that are important. And number one, the people of Zimbabwe is very important, because these are the people that uh, have been left under the bus all this time, and actually, or rather, who have been left behind by the systems, as everyone has been succeeding. The ZANU-PF regime has succeeded personally. Washington has succeeded personally. I mean, as an establishment. But right now, both of them, I am seeing both Washington and ZANU-PF, both of them are losing ground, with Washington losing ground in the global geopolitics and needing Zimbabwe, and ZANU-PF also a wounded animals who is losing favor with the international community, also have lost favor with the local community, and therefore will get itself at a position where they'll find themselves super squeezed and not be able to get out. And therefore, we need to create a path for our comrades in ZANU-PF to be able to have a life after this dispensation, or after these periods, previous period and the current period, the next relationship, there has to be an afterlife for them. So we do need, I do envision, the creation of a pathway that would lead to them to participate in the new Zimbabwean economy together with Washington, so that we can keep the free world, the spirit of the free world, intact, and and uh, and counter the agents of darkness that want to turn uh, this whole earth into something that will not be desirable for us and the future generations. Thank you very much.